Hello. We are creatures of habit. Every day we get up and we do the same things. We shower, we eat, maybe we commute to work, come home, and do it all over again. Add in family, friends, exercise, laundry, and before you know it, your week is completely consumed. Over the years, these habits become hardwired, and unlearning these behaviors seems virtually impossible. Behavioral patterns are learned at an early age. We learn by observing those around us, and their habits become normalized. Our environment has an extraordinary impact on who we are and the habits we pick up. For example, food is something that is culturally rooted. For a lot of families, food is a fabric that brings us together. We use food to celebrate different chapters in our lives or coming together after a long day of work. For me, growing up in the prairies of Canada, food played an important role in my family and it heavily influenced who I am today. So I come from a family of grain farmers, and we've been doing this for generations. And although I didn't grow up on a farm, it was core to my family's roots. And during harvest season, we would all come together and celebrate. And this is actually a video that my uncle took from his drone. They're getting a little techie these days. And we would all come together and eat. And it was always common for us to have more food than people, because of course we wouldn't want anyone to go home hungry. And these meals were hearty, the staple being meat and potatoes. But this wasn't just our family, this was the cultural norm. Growing up, eating the way we did, and the act of cultivating food led me to believe that nothing should be changed. From my perspective, the farming industry as a whole seemed like a sustainable practice based on what I'd been exposed to. On the day of my high school graduation, I decided to unlearn 17 years worth of culturally ingrained habits. Before my family came over for dinner to celebrate, I accidentally stumbled upon a video about industrialized farming, and this flipped my world upside down. It's like I've been looking at the world through my family, not realizing the other extent of the farming industry. And coming to understand the impacts of my actions and the impact that that had on the environment and animals was enough to make me switch to a plant-based diet in that moment. And when I came downstairs to break the news to my family, they were a little shocked, to say the least. I remember my auntie saying, "But you can still eat fish, right?" I couldn't eat anything on the dinner table that night. Who did I think I was, saying yes to some foods and no to others? My actions were making others' lives more difficult, and I wasn't the one putting the food on the table. We are products of our family's traditions and behaviors, and it's hard to go against the norm when it's your family, and when you're told from a young age to always eat everything on your plate and to be grateful for the food that you have. And I'm fortunate enough to have 3 brothers, and at the dinner table, they would tell me, "Your actions won't make a difference, you're just one person. I don't know why you're trying." And those are pretty harsh words, but I was stubborn and committed to my decision, and 10 years later, I would have never guessed that one decision at 17 would have had such a profound impact on who I am today. So if we take a step back and look at the current population, it now accounts for 7.4 billion people. And as our numbers continue to rise and population grows, we will only need more food, land, and resources. And this is accelerating climate change. Typically, when we think of global warming or human-caused climate change, we think about temperatures rising, maybe the strangely warm winters in London that we all sort of kind of like, or maybe the fossil fuels that are being emitted into the atmosphere. But I think what we often forget is that as consumers, our daily actions have an impact, specifically when it comes to the food on our plates. The agricultural industry is one of the top contributors to climate change, but I think most of us are a little bit unaware of that, and the food on our plates have an impact. And to put things into perspective, if we look at time, it's always, the things that we need to do in this week or all the meetings that we have to get to. It's always about trying to save time. But if we start to look at time that we have, in the 24 hours, or maybe the time that we have left on this planet, we can start to put things into perspective. Every action that I take has a reciprocating impact. What will my carbon footprint look like in the next 50 years? And better yet, how will the actions that I take today, whether it's how I get to work or the food I buy, impact generations and the planet after me? Time is hardwired into everything we do. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we are constantly trying to save time. For example, let's say we wake up late, we're really tired from the night before, and we don't have time to make coffee. So we think to ourselves, oh, I'll just grab one on the way to work. That will be easier. This is a common behavior that has resulted in over 20 billion plastic coffee cups in the UK alone. As a collective, our actions have an impact. And often our rationale to these everyday actions is due to the lack of time that we have in our lives. I don't have enough time to cook, or I don't have enough time to fix things, or I don't have enough time to bring a reusable cup. It's all about that short-term goal. And the notion of us saving time has resulted in us cutting corners when it comes to the environment. This is the wrong slide. So to put things into perspective, if I would have continued consuming animal byproducts for the past 10 years, my carbon footprint would have looked much different. The agricultural industry is extremely wasteful, not only in terms of greenhouse gases, but the sheer amount of water that we use to grow livestock. It takes 15,000 liters of water to produce just 1 kilogram of beef. That's enough water to fill your average size swimming pool, all for 1 kilogram of beef. Imagine if someone just tossed that into the bin. The agricultural industry uses 80% of global fresh water. And in the UK, we consume 84.2 kilograms of meat per person per year, in contrast to Americans where they consume 127 kilograms. That breaks down to 1.6 kilograms each week in the UK and 2.4 in the US. By switching to a plant-based diet, we could drastically reduce our greenhouse gases by 70%. Our lifestyle and this demand is something that our planet can't keep up with. We would actually need 2 planets. But the fact is we only have one. The depletion of natural resources is not only affecting our food systems, but it's affecting our biodiversity and our human health. So how did we get here, and why is it so hard to change? I believe that this is due to the convenience factor that has completely consumed our lives. Everything is so accessible, and it's just a click away. We no longer have to fight queues out the door after work. If we don't have anything to eat, it's no problem. We can easily have something delivered to our house in less than an hour. Amazon, Deliveroo, and other services alike have created such efficient systems where they've reduced all barriers, where as consumers we no longer have to think or invest time in our actions. And these types of services make reducing our impact on the environment much more challenging. So how might we create services and products that start to create behavioral change? As a product designer, I ask myself this question every day. How might I propose new alternatives that get to the crux of a true problem for people and solve a need, while simultaneously looking at the systemic effects that that product or service may have on the environment? And when looking at broken systems like the food industry, it's really hard to know where to start. It's a wicked problem, and there isn't one solution to solve it all. And when working on a collaborative project in New York, we sought to try to address some of these challenges and issues, where we asked the consumers to become the producers. And now this is in an area where healthy food wasn't readily available, which is a tad ironic considering that in New York, each family throws away about 20 pounds of perfectly good food each month. So we have a surplus of food, and we have a food desert. So we designed a service where we asked people to collect their food waste, and in exchange for their efforts, they would get credit towards fresh food from the farm. It was a win-win situation. We were asking people to take the time for the environment, collect their food waste, which could then grow food for the community. As a designer, I can create services and products to try to create behavioral change, but at the end of the day, it's whether or not the individual wants to adopt that change. And the amazing thing about this project is that the kids were their ambassadors for this change. They were so excited about the idea of collecting food waste, turning it into compost, and then growing food for their community. And when kids are excited about something, it's contagious. Other kids are excited and families are excited, and it sparks a change in the community. As individuals, as families, as communities, and as global citizens, it is our responsibility to make the time for the environment. It doesn't have to be anything drastic, it's just small little changes in our daily lives. And by doing these small changes, we can start to push producers and policymakers to find new alternatives that are good for us and the planet. There are many ways that we can make time for the environment, and here are a few things that you could do today. The first is read labels. Often everything we buy, for better or for worse, comes in a package, and that package can often determine where your product is coming from. Typically, our food travels thousands of miles, hours on end to get into our hands, and that process of the transportation, the storage of those products is extremely wasteful. By buying something that's produced in the UK, or even better, produced locally, we can start to cut down on that waste. We can also look to logos like the Euro leaf. Perhaps some of you have seen it before. This is a logo that represents certified organic products in the EU. So you know that that product is not genetically modified, which is good for your health and the planet. We can also read ingredients. For example, palm oil is an ingredient that most of us consume on a daily basis, and we're completely unaware of it. It's in everything from our soap, our shampoo, noodles, Kit Kat bars, you name it, it's probably in it. And palm oil is the #1 contributor to deforestation and the near extinction of orangutans. Forests in Indonesia are being completely cleared to make way for plantations, all just to keep up with the demand. And it's crazy to think that one ingredient in your soap could be contributing to this much destruction, where our forests are being depleted and our orangutans are nearly extinct. It's as simple as taking a product, reading where it's coming from, and identifying the ingredients within it. It takes less than a minute. Reading the labels on our products can also extend itself to the labels on our clothing. Big companies like H&M, Zara, Topshop produce clothing that can be found nearly anywhere at a fairly affordable price. But this is at the cost of the environment and workers' rights. As consumers, we look at the finished product and not the process behind it, the toxins that are leached into the environment, or the workers' rights that are being completely abused. I saw this bin on my way to work the other day, ASOS bag, perfectly good clothing. I thought this summed up so nicely how we as consumers no longer buy for longevity or for quality, and we've bought into this idea of quick trends and bargains. And the sad thing was that there was a proper recycling bin for clothing just a few steps away. Alternatively, we can look to secondhand or companies that are committed to reducing their impact. Companies like Patagonia produce clothing with sourced organic materials. They have all sorts of initiatives in place when it comes to the environment and workers' rights, and they produce products with a lifetime warranty. Patagonia is just one example, and there are many other companies out there with similar values. It's just about taking the time to research and understand your products. So the next time you go to buy clothing, consider where it comes from, the people, and the environmental impact it has. And when you're done with it, don't toss it away in the bin, because that will end up in the landfill. Properly recycle it in a clothing bin or donate it. Like fast fashion, fast food also has an impact on the environment. By bringing your lunch, you can avoid overly packaged food. Let's think back to the last time that we went to the shop to buy a salad. Our fork, our knife, our napkin, in a little plastic bag. Our salad box, plastic. And to top it off, they put it in a plastic bag for your convenience. And most of this plastic cannot be recycled and ends up sitting in our landfills and polluting our oceans. By bringing your lunch, you can do something that's good for the planet and your wallet. Because 20% of the food we buy in the UK ends up in the bin. That's just food, perfectly good food that we didn't get around to using. And this has resulted in over 10 billion tons of food waste in the UK in the last year. And lastly, go meatless for 1 meal a week. So I'm not saying everyone should stop eating meat and the world should go vegan, although if you said you were going to, I probably wouldn't be offended. But it is about reducing our intake. If we could just cut our consumption of meat and dairy by 1 meal a week, we could drastically reduce greenhouse gases and we could feed so many people. Food is just one aspect of our lives, but it plays a big part in our ecological footprint. It's about taking the time to acknowledge our actions and the impacts behind our choices. Consider one thing that you can do in a more environmentally conscious way. Whether it's how you get to work or if it's the food you buy, how could you do that one thing in a more environmentally conscious way? Just try it for a day and see how it works. Then maybe try it for a week, it's just a few more days. And then imagine if you did that one thing for an entire month, a year, 5 years, or even a decade. That one thing will have a massive impact on the environment. For me, it was about changing my behaviors when it comes to food. What might that one thing be for you? It's a gradual shift, but over time these habits will become ingrained and will no longer be seen as an inconvenience or a waste of time, and we will create new habits. As an individual, your actions have an impact. But as a collective, our impact could be so much greater. Just imagine if a few of us in this room walked away and did one thing for an entire decade. The environmental impact would be massive. So how will you make time for the environment? Thank you.